5 Live Formula One.
Hello and welcome to the first practice session of round 19 in the 2023 Formula One World Championship. We're in Mexico City. We're at the circuit Hermanos Rodriguez for what should be quite an interesting Grand Prix weekend, a conventional Grand Prix weekend as well, not a sprint race for the first time in a few. I'm Jolyon Palmer. I'm joined by a brace of ABs in the commentary box. Alex Brundle, Andrew Benson. How are we, chaps? Are we looking forward to this?
Very much so. Yeah, it, as you correctly say, JP, it's going to be a really interesting race weekend with the differential factors, the variables of this Mexican Grand Prix circuit playing havoc, hopefully, with the traditional order and giving us some excellent action out on track.
Yeah, and I'm really intrigued by Mercedes. Obviously, the kind of story of Mercedes' revival in Austin kind of blew up after 2 hours after the race when they were found illegal for running too low. But they think that they have made a step forward with their car regardless, and I'm really interested to see this weekend whether that's true.
It is going to be an interesting one. 3 hours of practice coming up this weekend. That's the big difference compared to the last couple of events. That was, of course, the voice of BBC's chief F1 writer, Andrew Benson, and sports car maestro, European sports car champion Alex Brundle alongside me. And Al, you gave this track quite a hard time on the podcast that we recorded. You can listen to it, the Checker Flag podcast, available in your usual places. Have you had time to reconsider?
I think it's a better place to watch a race than it is to drive one, to be honest. I don't like the first sector, the 90-degree corners and the slow stuff. I don't think it's a particularly thrilling middle sector. But what I will say is you do get an interesting change to the way that the cars line up here so often. And you do get interesting Grand Prix. It's one of the longest runs of the year from grid to first corner, which generates a lot of towing action down towards what is a tricky three-corner complex in the early sector of the lap. You do have that tremendous amphitheatre towards the end of the lap where you have the great, excitable Mexican fans cheering on their home hero. We'll talk a little bit more about that throughout the race weekend. So it has its charms. I have raced here. I have enjoyed it, but not quite as much as some other venues, it must be said.
It's a bit rubbish, isn't it?
Oh, Andrew.
I know you've bounced over a curb on the exit of onto the pit straight a few years ago, Jolyon, but it's all slow corners. The SCs are quite nice.
Hey, that wasn't the fun bit.
Wasn't it?
Did a chassis over the curve. I didn't even qualify here.
That's what I meant. Yeah. So the SCs are quite fun, but the rest of it's a bit rubbish, and they've ruined the best corner by removing it altogether and replacing it with the fiddly baseball stadium that you were talking about just a second ago, Alex. So what you can say about this race is I think if this was run at sea level, it would probably be a track where you trim the wings out because the straight is so long, but actually they run maximum downforce in terms of settings, but because of the thin air, it's at nearly 2,300 meters in altitude. They've got less downforce on the car despite those big wings than they would have at Monza. So it's a high downforce track, and actually in terms of wanting an interesting race and not a Red Bull win for anyone who's a bit fed up of watching Max Verstappen cross the finish line first this year, this probably gives as good a chance as any for a while, because the Red Bull, if it has a weakness, it's at absolute high downforce.
One of Verstappen's best tracks statistically, this one.
There is that too, yes.
Won 4 times around here. And he's going to be still the man to beat. The driver that is the champion, 3-time world champion now, Max Verstappen, on 466 world championship points, leading his teammate Sergio Perez second in the title race, and the fan favourite, of course, here by a cool 226 points. Perez back on 240. There's still intrigue about second in the championship. Perez and Hamilton split by 39 points after Hamilton was disqualified from the last race on Sunday in Austin. We'll get into that over the course of this hour, I am quite sure. But it's a very pleasant day in Mexico as well. Air temperature 23 degrees, blue skies, some scattered clouds around, and for the first time I feel in quite a while, not searing hot temperatures as well. So as you say, maximum downforce in the thin air of Mexico. Track temperature up to 43 degrees. And I feel like this is always one that you're limited on grip. pretty much everywhere. It's always a tricky one for the drivers.
Well, those cooler temperatures met with the softest 3 compounds of tyre once more, which Pirelli have brought, the C5, C4 and C3. It's a relatively low energy circuit surface here as well, which I think is what you're alluding to, JP. It doesn't really take from the tyre here, does it? That abrasiveness is not on track, and so it can be difficult actually to build the tyre temperature that you need. Everything, of course, behaving slightly differently with this altitude, not least the amount of downforce, which of course you would need to drive energy into the tyre and build tyre temperature as well. So that's the difficulty that the drivers are facing throughout qualifying. But a long way to go and a lot of young drivers to run in this FP1 session.
That is true. We've got 5 young drivers in this session. Finally, we're seeing some young drivers driving in Formula 1 again. This rule has now been in for the second year, that young drivers must run in an FP1 session at 2 occasions for each team this season. We're going to see some action, and the sound you can hear now is Isaac Hadjar pulling away in the Alpha Tauri. He is replacing Yuki Tsunoda in this session. We've also got Ollie Behrman, quite an exciting prospect in the Haas. We've got Jack Doohan in the Alpine. We've got Théo Pourchaire in the Alfa Romeo. And we've got Frederick Vesti in the Mercedes, sitting in for George Russell in this hour. So plenty for them to do. And it is a tough circuit as well for those rookies to jump in. Tough
circuit to get their head around. Bit of background on those. Isaac Hadjar, one of the 6 Red Bull Junior drivers running in Formula 2 this year. Ollie Behrman, sitting in the newly upgraded Haas, is a Ferrari Academy driver who's been putting in some sterling performances throughout Formula 2. Frederick Vesti, the man who very recently lost the Formula 2 championship lead to the other man who sits in an Alfa Romeo this weekend, Théo Pourchaire, who some thought was going to be a driver who would take that seat away from Zhou Guanyu moving into next year. Was not to be. Zhou Guanyu signed again into 2024. So some exciting and interesting young talent all coming from that Formula 2 level out on F1 tarmac.
19 cars out on track. We've got 57 minutes and 50 seconds to go. Fernando Alonso with a lot of gubbins on the rear of the Aston Martin. There's big aero rakes off the back of the car attached to the rear wing. Andrew, Aston Martin were talk of the town in Austin for the wrong reasons on Friday and into Saturday. It got a little bit better for them on Sunday. Here's Pourchaire.
The pedal feels strange. As soon as I have the alarm on the dashboard, the pedal is longer.
Okay, do your best for now, keep going.
That is the French voice of Théo Pourchaire, sitting in for Valtteri Bottas in the Alfa Romeo in this session. Andrew, Aston Martin.
Yeah, so they had an absolutely terrible weekend in Austin, didn't they, Jolie? And it's as Lando Norris was a bit cheeky. I can't remember whether it was in Qatar or Austin, where he said that basically every upgrade they put on the car has made it slower this year. It certainly looks that way. They've slid backwards through the field since the middle of the season, and they tried a new floor in Austin, and they had a difficult first practice session and didn't get the car set up right as a result because they had front brake problems, and then qualified. It was Alonso's worst qualifying of the year by a mile. He didn't get out of Q1, and the sprint qualifying wasn't much better. They changed the car for the race and started from the pit lane, and he was going a lot more competitively then, but then he had to retire with a floor problem. Now, he's got those aero rakes on that you were mentioning here in Mexico today because they're trying the new floor again. So they're obviously, those aero rakes, they measure pressure, and they're obviously trying to work out exactly what that new floor is doing and whether it's a step forward or not, because unsurprisingly, Alonso was the quicker Aston Martin driver in the race in Austin. He had the old floor on and Stroll had the new floor on. Now, the problem is that Alonso is the quicker Aston Martin race driver no matter what. So I don't know what they'll have learned from that. They'll have been looking at pressure points after that race too. So it's a lot of learning for them today.
But actually, both Aston Martins looked better on Sunday. So they clearly optimised the new car as well a little bit more, took them both out of parc fermé conditions, started from the pit lane. And now with 3 hours of practice, they're going to be a team hoping to unlock a little bit more potential there.
Interestingly, they and Mercedes, the only 2 teams that have not brought circuit-specific upgrades. And looking at the Haas, which is circulating around in the hands of Ollie Behrman at the moment, it has massive, great gills opening down the engine cover in what looked like a really aggressive effort to cool that Ferrari engine. Looks like something out of Finding Nemo heading down towards turn 1.
Yes, interesting looking at the update list, wasn't it, Alex? Virtually everyone's got bigger cooling loops on for this weekend, and it's because of the thin air. Obviously, less oxygen in the air, it's less air to cool the radiators in the engine, and so on and so forth.
Big lock up from Behrman down towards turn 4. So the first sector really is tight, twisty, slow-speed chicanes. Turn 4, a left and a right. Now Behrman comes up towards turn 6, a double apex right-hander, and then goes into the medium speed. Should be kind of high speed, looking at the track map, but it's just not with the low downforce we've got here. So Behrman is sitting in the Haas today. He's instead of Kevin Magnussen. The other drivers to miss out: George Russell, again, not in the Mercedes. Frederick Vesti is in for this session. There is no Yuki Tsunoda. It's Isaac Hadjar in the AlphaTauri. There's no Pierre Gasly either. Here's Hadjar.
I am on this stall, mate. I am on this stall.
He's got
anti-stall issue in the car, and it's something that we hear from Isaac Hadjar a lot in Formula 2 running. He's very, very animated over the radio, much like the man he's replacing, in fact. So I think an immediate crossover there for everyone down at AlphaTauri. Yuki Tsunoda gives us a big smile on the pit wall to say, look, it's not just me that yells down that radio.
And his race engineer must be like, oh no,
not another one.
We've done one lap now, and it already screams down the radio. Hadjar is back into the pits with anti-stall issues then, so he has no time on the board. We've got 53 minutes and 38, 37, 36 seconds left, and here's Charles Leclerc.
The engine does a slight strange noise when I'm full throttle, like a metal noise. Just for info.
May well be the turbo working much harder than it does at any other race, or it could be some sort of reliability issue for Leclerc.
Not a great sign, is it? A little tinkling of some metal in the engine in your early laps.
But it is interesting with a turbo engine. Of course, you're operating with around 75% of the oxygen available in the air, so the turbo will try to recoup that loss of air pressure and basically compress harder to meet its compression target, to put air into the engine at the air pressure that it's aiming at. So what you don't get is that as much less power as you would in a naturally aspirated car, for example, running at these air pressures. What you do get is a lot more turbo temperature, and that can create really big reliability issues here in Mexico.
Yeah, the thin air causes lots and lots of havoc for everyone. The drivers sliding around, the reliability of the car's an issue as well. First lap's coming in. Alex Albon, top of the times in the Williams. He's ahead of Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez, the two Red Bulls, second and third. Leclerc, Ricciardo in fifth position behind Charles Leclerc. Then it's Sainz, Piastri, Hamilton, Hülkenberg, Zhou, Ocon, Sargent, Stroll, Behrman and Vesti, the newbies, in 14th and 15th. Alonso back in the pits with no time, nor has Pourchaire, Doohan, Hadjar, and Norris as well has just come out, circulated once past the pits and come straight back in on the next lap. So no time on the board for those five. And it also looks typically dusty on the circuit as we're seeing Sergio Perez now come into the final sector, the Foro Sol Baseball Stadium. 180-degree corner, so slow and steady. Hear a little ripple of cheers for the home driver coming into that final sector. Now he'll accelerate out of it and get a time on the board. No, he won't. Peels off to the right-hand side, and Perez comes in as well. So a typically steady start there.
The surface here, quite an interesting one. It's not a very well-used circuit for the rest of the year, so it does have that large covering of dust. It's kind of loose sand and soil around the circuit as well. When you look at the surrounding areas, a lot of that blowing onto the racing surface. There's a relatively big change in the grip level of the circuit surface between all sectors apart from sector 3 and the final sector, where the final sector has considerably more grip through turns 13, 14 and 15 than the rest of the racetrack does. We're seeing something fly off. The AlphaTauri and Oscar Piastri has reported that there is some metal on the start-finish line. So I do wonder if it's lost an aero rake or a piece of detection equipment there, JP.
Yeah, it looked like a big piece of paraphernalia coming off there was 2 AlphaTauris running line astern at that time. It was Daniel Ricciardo that was the car in focus on the main straight. We're still running under green flag conditions, 50 minutes and 15 seconds left on the clock, and still everyone's starting to feel their way into this session. It's going to feel like a luxury now for them. 3 hours of practice.
It really will. It really will. And amazing how quickly you acclimatise, isn't it, to having to rush these practice processes. And they must have sat there in the trucks at the beginning of this weekend and gone, right, so we'll get it all done in an hour, and then what should we do for the second 2 free practices then? I think they got plenty on the list, but it really must feel quite luxurious to have this amount of time, as you say.
Yeah, my Formula One debut was in Melbourne 2016, and Friday was rained off. Jumped in for Saturday, felt absolutely normal. I've been used to half-hour practices in GP2, now at Formula 2, and it's only once you have the luxury of the 3 hours you can ease into it, run through your extensive test programs, which is what everyone is now on. This is the sound of the Red Bull of the 3-time world champion, 26-year-old Max Verstappen, who goes across the line and finally, 11 minutes into the session, takes top spot. But it's taken a little bit of time for him to knock Alex Albon off there, and there's a yellow flag out somewhere into the first sector, so we'll keep an eye on that. Big braking zones in the first part of the lap, and it is a Ferrari of Carlos Sainz, I think, who's going very slowly on the exit. Maybe has had a bit of a moment down there, but the green flag is out now and all is okay. So Verstappen half a second clear of Albon. Leclerc now into third, and as Sergio Perez comes around Carlos Sainz, still loads and loads of dust offline.
It really is, and it looks like Carlos Sainz, a man who was cruising slowly then down towards turn 1, right on the right racing line there for Carlos Sainz, and the yellow flag is just for him. You can hear the sound of it.
I lost the car. Hydraulics. I will try and make it back. I have no power steering. Sorry, Checo, but I have an issue with the car.
So major issue for Carlos Sainz. He's hopped through the first chicane, and he's trying to limp his way back. He apologises to Sergio Perez as well. Perez won't hear him, of course, but he got in the way of the Mexican driver down towards the second chicane. This is the sound on board the Ferrari. Notice not changing gear, so running up towards the rev limiter. He's down into the final sector now, and he should make it back from here.
And he's really making friends in the Ferrari on his way back to the pits, taking the shortest possible distance and the widest possible line, so he doesn't have to turn that steering wheel. Steering on these cars incredibly heavy without the assistance of the power steering system. He has managed to make it back. He has managed, I should say, to make it back, Carlos Sainz, into the pit lane, and will roll now through to his pit box. Hopefully that will be resolved relatively quickly for him and he can continue with his session, but I suspect that's going to be rather involved to sort.
He diagnosed it pretty quickly, didn't he? Hydraulic leak, hydraulic issue, and if it was that, I'm surprised that he's managed to make it back, considering it seemed to conk out before he actually made the braking zone for the first corner. But he has managed to make it back, so we remain under green flag conditions. Sergio Perez does the fastest first sector of anyone on this lap. He's pretty much 1 second cleanly behind Max Verstappen as he comes sweeping through the middle sector corners now. Turns 8, 9, 10, and then exiting through turn 11 up towards the final sector.
Something's happened.
What do you see, Lando? Or what do you feel?
Well, just look at the revs, mate. It's like the throttle got stuck on or something. Over-revved like hell.
And this is a real spate of reliability issues early. And I'm going to call this as electrical issues or ECU problems with the cars. Looking at what they're seeing, you've got to remember, these cars are sensing their environment all the time.
Yeah, but it was revving into the limit zones. So.
Yes, we see it and understand it. We're happy to continue.
Yeah, that's the voice of Lando Norris, who's complaining about those issues with the McLaren. But these cars are seeing pressures and temperatures that they're not used to seeing. And I do think it's generating a spate of sort of control-out-delete errors almost for the various cars, where they're not liking what they see, and cars are just failing for that reason.
So the sound you can hear is a replay of Norris leaving the pits, and he applies a bit of right-hand steering lock, gets into the fast lane, And then that is what he's complaining about, I think. It seemed like he was picking up the revs, had no drive, and then it found an extra little bit to buzz straight through the limiter.
That's just revving through the transmission, isn't it? It's displaying neutral on the steering wheel there, so it's almost like he got a false first gear, and then it popped back out into neutral. He's going round now, Lando Norris in 20th and final position without a time on the board.
Same issue, guys. Okay, same issue. Copy.
Oh, so that is the voice of Théo Pourchaire in the Alfa Romeo, who has the same issue. Now, he had a brake pedal issue on his first foray onto the circuit. He's just left the pits again. He's on a set of medium tyres, and he reports the same issue. So nightmare stuff down there for many of the teams. Norris continuing and starting a flying lap now on a set of hard tyres on the McLaren. But Pourchaire will probably bring that Alfa Romeo back, and when you get a chance at FP1 as a young driver, this is not what you want to happen. You want to get some clean laps, get a benchmark in maybe alongside Zhou, who of course was signed instead of Pourchaire. Pourchaire will feel he's got a point to prove, the driver that should become the Formula 2 champion in next month's Abu Dhabi finale. But at the moment, he is frustrated and he does peel back into the pits.
Cruelly, I do wonder if the teams know that as Lando Norris goes incredibly wide in avoidance of an Alpine, which was parked right on the apex of turn 13.
That's Esteban Ocon. Ocon right in the way of Norris. It's a quick approach into turn 13, and Lando went way wide out onto the dust on the apron there, and Ocon in fact now pits in after he's been slowed up by Norris, who definitely made his feelings known with a bit of car placement.
He certainly did, and Ocon looks like he may well be recovering to the pits with issues of his own there. Ocon absolutely asleep at the wheel of the Alpine, and Lando Norris giving him a little bit of right-hand steering lock as he heads down into turn 13 there, just to let him know he is not amused.
Smoky lockup you just heard was from Max Verstappen, who's reclaimed top spot from Sergio Perez, who momentarily took it. Both Red Bulls on the medium tyre. They are 1-2 and now 2 seconds clear of Charles Leclerc. And yeah, Ocon was just sitting on the racing line, wasn't he? He has peeled back in, so maybe more issues there for another team, another driver. The full order is this. Verstappen now 1.3 seconds clear of Perez. They've both done 10 laps and they're on a medium tyre. Then it's Leclerc, Ricciardo, Albon, Sainz, Ocon, Zhou, Piastri, Hamilton, Sargent 11th, Hadjar 12th, Hulkenberg 13th, Behrman 14th, 9/10 down on Nico Hulkenberg. Then it's Stroll, Vesti, Norris with not really a time on the board, aborted with the Ocon traffic, and then still nothing on the board for Alonso. Pourchaire with issues, and Doohan is out on track, 20th and last with no time on the board as yet. Fernando Alonso, presumably, they've got to de-rig that aero reg now, and that will be what they're doing at Aston Martin. So just to get a bit of data, they've thought it was worthwhile, go out, do a once past the pits, and it's going to cost them about 20 minutes at least.
Interesting place to do it here, isn't it, for Fernando Alonso? But I suppose they want as much of that data as we can possibly get. The sound you can hear is Jack Doohan arcing Pierre Gasly's Alpine into turn 1. The driver had a bit of a slow start to this year's Formula 2 season, but really came on as the year progressed, taking wins through the middle of the year, and is a very, very strong candidate, the Australian, for a Formula 1 seat in the future. Looking a little bit arms and elbows in the cockpit of that Alpine, it must be said, as he headed down to turn 4, just finding his feet, understanding the car, and it must be a bit perilous for the regulars. All of a sudden you've got these unknown drivers, these unknown quantities out on the racetrack, but in cars that you expect to be full of your normal counterparts, and you expect certain behaviours from them. All of a sudden you've got a guy in there who's never seen an apex in a Formula 1 car in race conditions.
Yeah, but you've got to assume that they're there on merit, and they're there because they're good enough to potentially be on the grid. And Jack Doohan was rumoured to be in the outside shot, racing in the Alpine after they lost out on both Piastri and Alonso last year. In the end, Gasly got the nod, and the Alpine reserve driver is reduced to racing in Formula 2 once again, a sophomore season for him. He crosses the line and momentarily got into the top 10, but he's just pipped by Isaac Hadjar. So the rookies finding their feet. There's a big old field spread. Aside from the Red Bulls, everyone else out there on a test tyre, and that is a Pirelli development tyre that is able to be run in this session, and that's a take on the medium tyre, effectively, with Pirelli trying to lock in some changes, improvements to the tyre compounds which we typically get around these races, Mexico, Austin in years gone by. But it seems like everyone's having to do their serious testing on a track like this, where you wouldn't normally do it, because we've got sprint races around. We've got Austin sprint, Qatar sprint, the next race, Brazil, is a sprint. After that, we've got Vegas, a new Grand Prix. So they're having to do their genuine practice running on a very unique circuit here.
They really are, and that is an issue, isn't it, with the sprint race format? You've got to take a bit of time away, but you can't afford to take any time away from teams if they're only going to get one free practice on a sprint race weekend. Beyond extracting those aero rakes from the back of Fernando Alonso's car, there look to be relatively significant work going on to the rear of the Aston Martin down there in the pit lane. So I do wonder if there has been a tiny little bit of damage to the rear of the car, or they're just trying to figure something out back there.
Or they're changing the specification already for a back-to-back test potentially at the start. No one has run over any big curves. They are there in the middle sector, but they're the sort of ones that would damage the underside of the cars. We've seen it in the past many times, but so far a very clean first 20 minutes as we jump on board the Australian Oscar Piastri into the final corner. He's got a set of soft tyres on. This is a decent lap from Piastri, finding a bit of pace through the Foro Sol slowest corner of the circuit, squeezing on the gas now towards the final right-handers, 16 and 17, flat out through 17, picking up the speed. Piastri goes up to fourth position then. He's the first driver on a set of softs today.
What do you think, JP? Even on a set of softs, that looks incredibly low grip through the middle sector. The track's so green at this stage. We're going to see a massive amount of evolution through the sections.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, and everyone's got to get used to driving with these low grip conditions as well. Oscar Piastri, this is his rookie as well. We've got 5 rookies having their FP1 outings, but Piastri hasn't driven here either, so he's got plenty to learn. We're going to bring hashtag BBCF1 back to life for this session. So if you've got a question for myself, Jolyon Palmer, Alex Brundle alongside me, or Andrew Benson, who's pondering life in the commentary box on the other side at the moment, you've got a question for any of us, then tweet them in at hashtag BBCF1 and see if any of these whimsical gentlemen can help you out. Lance Stroll is still running in the other Aston Martin up towards turn 4, so Alonso remains in the pits. No time for him, no time for Pourchaire. 18 other drivers have got a time on the board, and
I'll agree with whimsical, but gentleman is a stretch, I think, to be honest. At this stage we follow, listening on
still
board.
A racing driver. You can't be a gentleman racing driver.
JP. Lance Stroll wrestling the Aston Martin through the middle sector on a set of hard tyres, which looks even lower grip than the soft compound that we just listened into with Oscar Piastri coming off another difficult weekend. He was typically short, as he has been through the full end of the season on media day yesterday. It was yes, no, I think it'll be a good weekend, thank you, good night from Lance Stroll, whatever anybody asked him. So let's hope for the sake of the poor interviewers, he has a bit of a better weekend.
He's not making himself any friends in the media at the moment, I can tell you, Lance Stroll. We feel very...
Not you. Well, you can't even get any words out of it at the moment.
Everyone, aren't you, Benson?
It was one-word answers in the press conference in Austin as well. It was, not impressive. Sometimes, there are drivers that I've wondered in press conferences. Your former teammate Nico Hülkenberg is one of them, Jolyon, who's a bit sarky, a bit one-wordy, and I've sometimes wanted to grab Nico by the shirt and drag him down to Fernando Alonso's press conference and say, "This is how you do a press conference, mate." But
then you saw he was 6'1".
Then I saw he was 6'1", and rather more built than me. So yes, I never thought about doing it in the end. But it is quite frustrating, especially Lance Stroll. There's a lot of questions revolving around him at the moment. His Pourchaire's radio again.
Same issue.
Copy. Then we'll need to box again this lap.
He's not having a good time, is he, Teo Pourchaire, in the Alfa Romeo on his debut for a pre-practice session.
Nightmare stuff for Pourchaire. Coasts back in the Alfa Romeo. Same issue. So 3 times they've tried to troubleshoot that now in the Alfa Romeo. And Pourchaire, would have liked to see Pourchaire get a really clean run here.
Well, this is a real disaster for Pourchaire, with respect to the other young drivers in the car at the moment, and perhaps with the equal on an equal level to Ollie Bearman and maybe Frederick Vesti, it's fair to say that Théo Pourchaire was probably the closest driver to taking a seat into next year, to taking a Formula One seat into next year. He really needed this free practice session to go well, and it's turning into a bit of a damp squib for him, isn't it, really?
Yeah, so far, no good for Pourchaire, and that's not down to him. The car's just not letting him do anything other than install laps, effectively driving around, still with issues, and he waits and waits for a chance to drive the Alfa Romeo at full tilt. For Valtteri Bottas sitting on the pit wall, lazy morning for the drivers that make way, and he's not missing out on anything right now in that car. Lewis Hamilton on the brakes for the first corner, turns it into the right. The next is a quick left that comes up when you quickly bounce your way over the curbs, ride the apex through turn 3, get up on the exit curb, open the DRS, and extend the car down towards turn 4. Moving to the right-hand side, Hamilton hits the brakes. Personal best at the moment for Hamilton, but he hasn't done a huge amount in the first 25 minutes of this session either. Down in 50, Vesti in the other Mercedes 18th. And Andrew, should we get into it? Planked.
Yeah, so it's been an interesting one, hasn't it? Because they obviously got the setup wrong on a bumpy track on a sprint weekend. It's these things can happen, as Ferrari proved, because Charles Leclerc had the same thing happen to him. There's all sorts of question marks come out of it. One is this issue of scrutineering. You know, they scrutineered, they only measured the flaws of 4 cars, and the principle behind that approach is that you can't scrutineer every car for everything, because the cars have to go from one race to another, and there's just not time. And actually, it's funny hearing some of the people who are complaining about the fact that they don't scrutineer all the cars are the same people who tend to complain about why they can't just declare the result at the checkered flag. Anyway, so they made a mistake with the setup. The question is, it kind of ruined the story of the race, which was, a new part on the Mercedes. It was the closest race of the year, pretty much, for Max Verstappen. Lewis Hamilton certainly could have come out in front, stayed in front of Max Verstappen if Mercedes hadn't gone for the one stop, or tried to go for the one stop at their first pit stop, and rather instead had covered Verstappen. They would have kept track position. Then it would have been interesting to see if he could have battled for the win from the front rather than trying to catch him from the back. Either way, the Mercedes was impressively quick. The question was, how much of that performance was down to just the upgrade, and how much of it was from running the car lower than some of the other teams? Now, Mercedes say, no, it didn't have a performance effect. I've been speaking to other engineers at other teams saying, give me a break. Of course, running the car lower gives you more downforce. Hamilton's argument to that is that actually the Mercedes this year is optimised to run at a higher ride height than it was last year, when they were trying to get it as low as possible, which is inverse from the Red Bull, which they're trying to run as low as possible, which has been one of its advantages, that they can get it low without it porpoising. So that's why I'm so interested to see what happens this weekend.
Run it on stilts then. I mean, they want to be playing football underneath it. It's a little bit like saying, yeah, we used another set of tyres in qualifying, but we didn't go any faster on that set of tyres, so we've not broken the rules, isn't it?
And you don't know, or they don't know, we don't know, only Red Bull potentially know how conservative they were in regard to this rule as well. So Mercedes could say, it's a tiny little bit over. In reality, that cost us very little. But I guess the bigger question is, were Red Bull very compromised because they were conservative, raised the car, and they had more pace in hand? Because actually the performance was, considering the relative performance recently of the Mercedes and the Red Bull, it was a huge swing towards Mercedes.
On the face of it, so Verstappen was saying yesterday, yes, we were a bit too conservative with our setup, which means they ran it a bit higher than they think they probably could have got away with if they'd had another go at it. So that means their performance, yes, was definitely compromised. There's no question about that. What there is a question mark over is how much, if anything, did Mercedes gain by doing what they did. They would say hardly anything at all. Others are a bit more sceptical of that claim.
George, after the race, said, in fact, that Mercedes should have been further up the road. They miscalculated the fuel. He had to save fuel for 50% of the race, and that's what was costing him. But I don't buy the argument that in a ground effect car, I can understand that you would have to raise the ride height to set, to avoid bouncing or to avoid an aerodynamic phenomena that was interrupting your downforce production. But I don't see how running the car lower doesn't bring performance to you. In any case, the proof is in the pudding. I'm not sure it will be this weekend because there's so much differential in the way that the cars aerodynamically behave here, but through to the end of the season it will be abundantly clear and very interesting to see.
Exactly that. The next 4 races will give us that idea of whether they have made a significant step forward or not.
And what was also interesting was that you speak about George Russell saying that he was having to lift in coast to save fuel. He was particularly struggling, actually. So whilst Mercedes seemed to bring this floor upgrade that transformed the car, made them sort of outside podium contenders to potential race winners, that was only in the hands of Hamilton. Russell was really a long shot even for a podium last time out.
It was really interesting, wasn't it? It was the first time that bit of debris still on the pit straight, and Zhou Guanyu's just hit it in his Alfa Romeo, by the way. But we've just seen a replay of that, which is why I mention it. But it was interesting that for the first time in a long time, Russell was off Hamilton's pace quite considerably all weekend in Austin. And actually, Hamilton was saying that the upgrade, so James Allison, the technical director, had talked about it maybe being worth 1/10 of a second a lap, this new floor. But sometimes with upgrades, if it does the thing that if it does to the car what the driver wants, then the driver himself can gain an extra little bit of time just through confidence. And what both Hamilton and Toto Wolff were saying in Austin was that it had given Hamilton more of the rear downforce that he's been asking for from this style of Mercedes since the beginning of last year, basically. And that extra rear downforce gave him the confidence to commit to corner entries much more than he had been able to before. So he reckoned he was able to add another same amount again onto the lap time from the upgrade. What's interesting is why George Russell couldn't do that, because he also noticed the extra downforce.
It's interesting you talk about a driver there who wants to choose where he sits in the car to give him optimum feel over the rear of the car, and I think it's such a big factor for Hamilton. Teams always dancing around, as we spoke about in the podcast before the race weekend, peak of downforce versus the amount of downforce that the car is putting out when it's a little bit out of shape and the rear and the floor is moving around, and perhaps it's moved it a little bit towards Hamilton. We saw kind of a similar thing between the two Ferrari drivers, didn't we, mid-season, where all of a sudden Sainz took a step forward over Leclerc because Leclerc suddenly had too much understeer in the car and wasn't as comfortable. So interesting to see the balance moving around between the two.
Well, the Ferrari example is a really interesting one, because what happened was that there was a test after the Spanish Grand Prix in Barcelona. It was supposed to be a Pirelli tyre test, but they used it to try something on the car. And basically what that thing was, the car's so vicious in the first part of the year, they dialed some understeer into the setup to calm it down a bit. As you say, Alex, Leclerc hates understeer. So I don't think it's any coincidence that then there was a run of races where Sainz was kind of generally a little bit on top of Leclerc. And then they introduced a new floor in Suzuka, and that produced some extra downforce, extra rear downforce, which then allowed Leclerc to dial some oversteer back into it. And since Suzuka, he's been demonstrably faster. He's been a couple of tenths on average quicker in qualifying. Sainz was only beaten in one session, which was a sprint in Qatar. And it looks really to have turned things back to what you might think is a more normal Leclerc-Sainz arrangement.
I haven't noticed flip-flopping driver performance like this for a while in season. The Ferrari ones you speak about, Mercedes had their own. Russell was struggling before the summer break. After the summer break, came out all guns blazing in the next few races. Then the upgrade that is on the car now. It'd be interesting to see if that was a Hamilton special as well, because he's always been majestic at the Circuit of the Americas. Always in Austin, he performs well. So on a different track, will Russell be a little bit closer? We've got a bit more action on circuit. It's been quiet for a little while, but soft tyres for Verstappen on an out lap. Lando Norris winding up a fast lap as well. So Verstappen's still top of the times. Albon is still quietly up there, 4 thousandths down on him, medium to medium. Then it's Leclerc within a tenth, and Perez, who's also just left the pits on a set of softs. Let's see what Norris can do. Piastri at the moment in 6th position. Daniel Ricciardo up there in 5th as well, within half a second of the pace. The man that's been on pole here in the past has had a good start to his FP1 as well. Norris now coming up towards the faster corners. Turn 7, flicks it in, uses a load of curb on the way in, hugs the curb through the right-hander of turn 8, and he's going to be very quickly coming towards the final sector on this set of softs. Comes at you thick and fast this session.
starting to plug in, aren't they? The cars out on track. All of a sudden, Norris, purple through the middle sector, looking like he has a car which is vaguely following the direction in which he's steering it. For the first car I think I've seen do that for the whole session. They've all been sliding across the road as he arcs the car into the final corner and puts the power on, and the McLaren across the line and out to what I think will be the fastest lap of the session, and indeed it is. The track really moving forward though, isn't it? And each of these laps setting a new benchmark. I think that's what we're seeing here. The driver impressing me most though is Albon at this stage.
Norris top by 8 thousandths. 4 thousandths behind Verstappen in second is Alex Albon. The top three, for a moment, are separated by 12 thousandths of a second as poor old Théo Pourchaire radio's that he's still got the same issue. 35 minutes into the session and another round of troubleshooting. This is a nightmare. 4 wasted laps just circulating for Pourchaire, trying to fix his pedal issues that he reported earlier on. This is the sound on board Sergio Perez down towards the final sector. He's got a slow-moving Alfa Romeo that jumps out of the way. That was Théo Pourchaire, who's going to be limping his way back to the pits. Perez clambers over the curb at the right-hander of 14. Couple corners to go now. The wall comes at you pretty quick on the exit of 16, but he's managed to find the grip, drives to the line, set of soft tyres for Perez, and he nudges his way between that tight gaggle. Norris, Albon, Perez and Leclerc all separated by just 600ths of a second, but they're now half a second behind Max Verstappen. So for a moment, 12,000 separated the top bunch, half a second now, and that's like for like, track time and tyres. Verstappen now clear of Norris, Albon, Perez and Leclerc, split by a hair behind.
Interestingly, Perez not impeded there through the middle sector, but he will have lost something. It was a slower sector for him. His least performance sector, if you like, of that particular run. And that was, I think, due to the car ahead of him, which peeled out of the way entirely sensibly, but appeared to lose him quite a lot of front end due to the aero wash. Isaac Hadjar in the AlphaTauri running a significant amount of Flowbiz. Thing looks like Kermit the Frog. He's got so much green paint on it.
I need to borrow something between my feet. It is loose.
Yeah, understood. Box.
Verstappen on the radio then. GP.
Deliver the Vettel line. Please deliver the Vettel line.
He's not got it in him. He's coming round now the final couple of corners. The Vettel, the cheeky chap. Verstappen.
Go on, you tell him.
Verstappen. What was the quote? It's not what you think it is.
Beside the obvious.
Yeah, there we go. Verstappen, ruthlessly to the point, ruthless in every sense of the word, especially this year, and he's back into the pits. With GP, he's been pretty ruthless as well this season. That's how they operate on the team radio. But the champion, top of the times, half a second clear, is back in the pits, and the Red Bull crew can have a little look at that. Esteban Ocon jumps into the top 10 in the Alpine, more times coming in on the soft tyres. We're still waiting for Mercedes. They are the major player, or particularly Hamilton. Russell not in this session. Frederick Vesti has done a lap on the softs, but he's a long way away, 3.2 seconds in 16th, running a different programme. Carlos Sainz is on a set of softs as well. So Sainz and Hamilton, the two that we're yet to see. Hamilton has just left the pits. He's on an outlap. So then we'll get a pretty early picture of where we're all at.
He's done more on the test tyre than anybody else in this session, Lewis Hamilton. Both he and to be fair, Carlos Sainz, who sits out of contention back in 17th place, are getting their days together very late. Sainz now about to finish his first really competitive lap on a set of soft tyres in the Ferrari, so we'll see what he comes across the line on. All sectors green so far in the Ferrari as he makes his way. You can hear him now arcing through the final corner. DRS will not open for Sainz in the final zone as he crosses the line.
We've had a Kermit the Frog, a Finding Nemo, all the references today, Brundle.
Wildlife
I'm waiting for the hat trick.
Wildlife watch.
There's got to be another reptile or an amphibian in there somewhere.
There'll be a moment, but you can't force it. Looking at that car for Max Verstappen, who is out of the vehicle in the Red Bull garage, and fearsome work going on to try to deal with whatever issue that he had.
Should remind everyone that Planet Earth 3 came out last week on BBC iPlayer. If you're interested in frogs, fish, goldfish, no less.
Oh, I knew I had something to voice over today.
You're in the wrong job, mate. You're in the wrong job.
They all know that already. Lando Norris heading in his McLaren. He's been getting the work done, hasn't he, Lando Norris? Really putting the laps in. Half second back from Max Verstappen. Has kept going on this soft compound tyre. Really getting a feel for it out there.
Hamilton on a flyer as well now, on the soft. Sainz has joined his teammate in the top 6. So Verstappen, half a second clear of Norris, Albon, Perez, Leclerc, and then Sainz 2 tenths back from that gaggle. Hamilton on the soft tyres comes through the final corner and jumps up to 8th position. So the Mercedes now into the top 10. Same tyre, similar time as the rest of the field. Hamilton 1 second away from Verstappen, half a second down on everyone else.
I'm going to chuck a spotlight out there, and the spotlight I'm going to chuck is at Daniel Ricciardo, sitting in 7th position in the AlphaTauri on a set of medium tyres. One of 2 drivers, the other being another impressive driver for the session of Alex Albon in the top 10, who have yet to run the soft, or at least have yet to set their fastest time on the soft. That's a very promising start to the weekend from Ricciardo. He finished last of the runners in COTA, and perhaps the little bit of race rustiness that he was talking about through the Circuit of the Americas weekend starting to be WD-40'd away, and he starting to get back into the swing of things in the AlphaTauri.
Ricciardo 8th, within a second, just ahead of Lewis Hamilton on his run a set of soft tyres. But his best lap has come on the medium as well, Ricciardo. Isaac Hadjar in the other AlphaTauri in this session. Yuki Tsunoda will take over normal service in FP2 in a couple of hours' time. Tsunoda on the pit wall, watching and listening in to everything Isaac Hadjar's got to say about his car. He's 1.3 seconds down on Daniel Ricciardo, and he too has run the soft tyre. Sergio Perez on a slight improvement into the final couple of corners. Turn 13, super slow, past the baseball stadium, riding the curbs through the final couple of corners now. And Perez currently 4th, behind a Williams and a McLaren. Can he jump up and make it a Red Bull 1-2? Yes, he can. That's the fastest final sector as well for Perez. He's within 3 tenths now of Verstappen.
Bit of a tidy up through the middle for Sergio Perez, who has managed to put the car up front and got a proper cheer this time. Did you hear him going through the middle sector?
I'm surprised we've not been hearing more Perez cheers from the word go, you know. This is Sergio Perez land.
It is very. They might as well call it. If the Rodriguez brothers were not such massive stars in Mexico, it could well be called Sergio Perez Circuit. Should he be P1? Well, he isn't quite yet. We can see his father in the pit lane, hoping for it, praying for it. But a lot of drivers there watching on from the side. Have you ever been in that situation where you've had to give up, we've had to cede your car in FP1 to a young driver? How do you go about that, and just how much does it set you back, JP?
Honestly, I didn't mind it all that much. These guys, they're consummate pros. They're the best drivers in the world. It's a 1 hour session. I had to give it up for Sergei Sirotkin, was at Renault when I was there. I think Latifi might have had a jump in at some point. You get a nice lie-in on a Friday. You chill out, put your feet up, watch the telly for the first hour of the day, and hope they don't crash your car, and then jump in. And typically, you know, Formula One teams are not stupid. They'll put the reserves in on the track that will impede the race drivers the least. It's effectively a service that they've got to do. There's regulation that determines that they have to give up these 2 slots. Ollie Behrman basically said that. Günther Steiner said, just don't crash the car, we got to give you a run out, enjoy it, please don't crash. And Behrman currently is doing a great job in 16th, just a couple of tenths down on Nico Hulkenberg in 15th. So he's having a great run. But these guys, Magnussen in Behrman's car, he'll jump in and be fine later on, I'm quite sure.
I tell you what, that is an impressive effort, isn't it, from Ollie Behrman? The driver, I mean, you're talking about a driver there who's in Formula 3 cars just over a year ago. Now he's in FP1 in a Haas, in a newly upgraded Haas, and he's got within 2 tenths of a second, albeit on the hard tyre, of Nico Hulkenberg. You don't know the fuel levels, but that's incredibly impressive with the grandeur of the moment. We've seen him drive so confidently, the young Brit, throughout this season of Formula 2 running. He's been aggressive, and he's been incredibly quick at times, and had a few of those rookie mistakes That's a really impressive run. Fernando Alonso still sits in the pit lane in his Aston Martin, down in 17th position, which is what he will not the place that he will want to finish this session. Jack Doohan also not getting too much running in the Alpine, unfortunately, although he does just come across the line on a set of soft tyres to go 17th. Théo Pourchaire still struggling with that issue. They're your tail enders, really, your strugglers in FP1.
Yeah, Alonso's still been very quiet. 7 laps completed total for him so far, so he's not done a huge amount more than Pourchaire. Kieran has tweeted in, hashtag BBC F1, does Piastri, De Vries and Sargent's Bahrain FP1 session count as one rookie session for each of their teams? No, is the answer. They are fully fledged race drivers for this season. Even though they are rookies, there must be reserve drivers, young drivers, rookie drivers that are not in the main season that must do them. So there's no way around that for anyone employing a rookie full time. Roxy's got in touch, hashtag BBC F1, the old classic. Alex Brundle, what's your favourite cheese?
Oh, what is my favourite cheese? Mozzarella.
A weak shout.
Is that's cheese, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, you named a cheese. Well done.
I named a cheese. I like mozzarella, but mainly because it comes with pizza. So it's liking someone for their friends, isn't it? Really.
You're not a cheesy guy.
Not a cheesy Blake. Italian hard cheese of all descriptions as well. I'm
a Parmesan.
Parmesan, yeah, Parmesan.
A classic
Parmesan if I can get it. Italian hard cheese if I can.
Lovely stuff. Well, there you go, Roxy. All the amazing insight. I told you Alex Brundle was whimsical.
I fenced.
It's taken us 45 minutes, but we've come up with some gold from Brundle. An Italian hard cheese.
Keep on beavering away.
14 minutes left on the clock. Plenty of drivers back in the pits now. Verstappen leads Perez, Norris, Albon still fourth. I'm starting to wonder if this could be a Williams weekend. Andrew Benson, you getting excited about Alex Albon?
No. Looking at this list of times, and I'm not convinced that this is especially representative of this session.
Albon starts a lap on a soft tyre. Let's see how he goes. Currently fourth. He set a lap on a medium.
He was saying yesterday, by the way, he doesn't think it's going to be a good weekend for Williams. It's all slow corners.
But Williams famously don't know if it's going to be good or bad until they turn a wheel in the session. They've had some cracking weekends this year. Zandvoort, Williams didn't think they'd have any pace. Albon qualified fourth. Silverstone as well. And Andrew Benson. Albon comes through the first sector. He's the fastest of anyone.
You're getting very excited for an experienced man watching a first practice session in Mexico City.
I'm injecting the hype, Benson.
It is fun to talk to Alex Albon, though, at the beginning of weekends, because he goes, well, he said it a couple of times to me. I tend to get them when I'm on site for the interview pen after FP2. And he tends to go, we'll go badly if it's a fast track, unless it's such a fast track that we're going really fast, and then we'll go well. So which is clear as mud, isn't it, from Alex Albon?
He's a man who knows his stuff. Couple of corners to go then for Alex Albon. The last driver of pretty much anyone not a Haas or Alonso to set a time on the softs. Pourchaire, who still hasn't left the pits, can join that club as well. Albon keeps it tight out of the final corner, and he goes second. He's within a tenth of a second of Max Verstappen, so I can do the full order now. It's Verstappen from Albon, former teammates, back to 1-2. Then it's Perez, Norris, Leclerc, Sainz, Ricciardo, Ocon, Stroll and Hamilton. 11th place Piastri, then it's Zhou, Sargent 13th, Hadjar 14th, 15th Hulkenberg ahead of Behrman by a couple of tenths. Doohan 17th, Alonso, Vesti and poor old Théo Pourchaire is 20th and hasn't set a time.
We should clarify pedal. There are obviously two pedals in the car. When they refer to the pedal, it tends to be the throttle pedal. That's the control used often to manage the throttle pedal mapping. And when they talk about pedal, because it is fly-by-wire, they tend to be referring to the throttle pedal. Another question in on hashtag BBC F1. Anne Leonard asks us what the beam wing is. She's heard it referred to. She has seen it on the upgrade list. The beam wing is the lowest element of the wing. So you've got the main plane, the DRS plane, which is the one which lifts up and goes down again. The very bottom element is the beam wing, and it's very important because it makes a lot of downforce and also manages the airflow out of the base of the floor.
sports car maestro and tech guru, Alex Brundle there, answering your questions on hashtag BBC F1. Also, hashtag BBC F1. Ben Spivey, I think, has come in with a fun fact about Ollie Behrman, running 16th in this practice session. Oh, shuffled down to 17th as Jack Doohan improves.
Cut and thrust.
On the day he was born, Kimi Raikkonen won the 2005 Spanish Grand Prix, and Fernando Alonso came second.
Yeah.
Now Behrman is 17th, and Alonso is 18th in FP1. Makes you feel old, doesn't it, when the youngsters start coming through?
It really does. He's been flat out on it all year, doing a tremendous job, and they do seem to get younger and younger and more capable, and that may well continue as well with the Formula 2 car changing to become ever more accessible and ever lighter on the steering wheel. I can only see younger and younger drivers jumping through to that level, although they can't get too much younger, otherwise they won't be able to get a licence, such as the youth of our current crop.
Born in 2005, Ollie Behrman doing a cracking job today so far.
We were literally racing, the pair of us were literally racing single-seaters. Ollie Behrman was born.
He's doing a great job out there. Fernando Alonso was doing a great job through 2 sectors on a set of softs finally in the Aston Martin, but he straddled the curb coming into the final sector, got wide in turn 12, difficult corner, a fast approach into some very slow corners, and when he got up on that curb, Alex, not going to turn.
Really not behaving through the mid-corner, was it, the Aston Martin, as Frederic Vesti in the Mercedes is lighting the car up down the pit lane in preparation for what looked to be a practice start. You're listening into Lando Norris, who's going to do a very similar thing, very Tony Hawk pro skater 50-50 grind down the curb on the exit of turn 12 for Lando Norris. But I was speaking to Felipe Drugovich in mid-year about that Aston Martin and asked him, it was back in Hungaroring, right on the turn of when Aston Martin began to really sort of struggle. And I said to him, what's going wrong? He's like, everything we do to this car just seems to make it worse. Whatever we change to try to find more downforce, and it is a downforce and efficiency issue, just seems to make it worse. We cannot seem to get a magic combination of the elements available to give us downforce without drag.
That's the sweet spot, isn't it? When you get downforce and you don't start going just slower on the straights, you find the performance, and that's what everyone's looking for. Aston Martin have just tailed off miserably so far this season. Fernando said coming into the weekend, it's not all lost. We've still got loads of positives from the year. He was so positive in the early rounds. Couldn't stop him grinning when he turned up to the track. When he was on the track, the amount of happy family radio messages from Fernando, helping out his new teammate Lance Stroll. Still trying to help out Lance, but not quite the same atmosphere within the team now, Andrew.
No, it's quite remarkable, isn't it? On the one hand, you've got McLaren, who started the season really in the doldrums. At least they knew why they were in the doldrums, and said they were going to get better through the year, but I don't think they expected to get as much better as they have, and neither did anybody else. But they've really come to the fore from being close to the back to being sort of pretty much the second fastest car, or at least competing with Ferrari for being the second fastest car behind the Red Bull in qualifying in the last part of the season. As Aston Martin have gone completely the other way, haven't they? And they've really given a good impression of a team that's completely lost at the moment. Alonso's running the new floor in this session. In fact, I believe both cars are. Lance Stroll's in 10th place, about a second off the pace. You'd expect Alonso to be 3 or 4 tenths further up the road than that, but today, right now, he's not. He's 14th rather than 6th or so, that would put him. So, they're going to have... They'll be worrying for them going into the winter, because they obviously don't know what to do to fix the car.
Big slide from Behrman. I thought he was going to put it in the wall there, Andrew. Sorry. Coming through the middle sector. Behrman's on a set of softs and leaning on it and flirting with being a hero or being an absolute villain jumping in an FP1.
Really not scared of it, is he, Ollie Behrman? That's what you want to see, though, from a driver asked only not to crash. But he's here to make his mark, and he's a driver who really needs to, because he's got a finite amount of time to demonstrate that he's ready and prepared for a Formula One car. and good to see him out there giving it what for. They're on an interesting tyre strategy at the moment, Haas, who were really confident. Both drivers were really confident from the feeling they had in FP1 back in COTA that they'd made a step forward with the car, that big raft of upgrades coming in. Didn't get to demonstrate it, of course, with a pit lane start in the Grand Prix because they basically set the car up wrong. And I've just caught a second bite of that slide for Oliver Bearman, and he was about 10 degrees of lock away from a massive shunt there, wasn't he, Palmer?
At that speed, getting offline with that amount of lock on, oh, he's a lucky boy to... he's got car control, we'll give him that. 18-year-old... the 18-year-old Brit, Ollie Bearman from Chelmsford in Essex, and wow, Günther Steiner's heart rate must have gone up a few beats per minute when Bearman was on that flyer. Didn't improve in the end, unsurprisingly, on the soft.
Bit of a side-by-side moment there between Lando Norris and Sergio Perez, both of them refusing to yield down into the 90-degree apex of turn 4. Bit of brinkmanship over track position, which is interesting to see this early in the weekend.
Little fight in FP1. Alonso back in the pits. He was on a better lap as well, Alonso. So as you said, Andrew, Stroll 10th, a second away, or just within a second. Alonso was a few tenths down into the final sector, straddled that curve and lost a fair amount of time. So could potentially have got that Aston Martin towards the Norris-Leclerc half a second adrift of Verstappen pace, which is the encouragement that they'll take right now. Still far cry from where they were at the start of the season, but anything is going to be that for Aston Martin right now. 4.5 minutes left on the clock. Verstappen top, Albon second. Into the long runs for FP1 now, and still Théo Pourchaire back in the pits, and Alfa Romeo not able to fix that car at all. So rookie watch, Bearman 18th, 2 tenths down on Hülkenberg, who's just starting his lap on the soft tyres now. 17th and 18th for the two Haas. So that's like for like on the hards. Bearman has run a set of softs, almost spattered into the wall, and is still out there on the soft tyres, but Hülkenberg should now find a bit of pace and put some gap between himself and his rookie teammate. Vesti is 19th and slowest of the runners out there so far in this hour. Will probably be slowest of the runners now. He's on a hard tyre, having run a soft earlier on. Hamilton is 2.2 seconds up the road, so you can imagine that the two Mercedes are running quite different programmes, as are the two Alpines doing 16th, and a good chunk, 1.4 seconds down on Esteban Ocon, who's up in 9th. Hadjar is 15th in the AlphaTauri, and 1.4 seconds down on Daniel Ricciardo. So Hadjar is the top rookie in this one so far, in 15th position. Could be 16th in a minute if Hülkenberg puts this lap.
Interestingly, Bearman has put us, and it shows you the difficulty of jumping into Formula One cars and how the varying different disciplines of how you need to drive them it becomes apparent as Hülkenberg will not be improving because he's gone well wide in the hairpin left of turn 13 in the Haas. But Oliver Bearman has run a set of soft tyres and hasn't improved over his hard tyre lap earlier.
Well, that was the lap that he almost spinned it.
Okay.
So he was trying to improve, but he was very, very erratic. He actually might still improve, as Hülkenberg did miss the turn in for turn 13, the really tight left-hander, and we can get a replay. This is the sound of Hülkenberg now coming into the stadium section.
Yeah, he's going to have a big lock-up of the inside front. Well, not a big lock-up, a medium-sized lock-up, enough to take him wide, though, through the exit of turn 13.
And he had the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll right in the way of him as well. Stroll not getting out of Hülkenberg's way. Stroll on a high fuel run. And that's always the issue when you're trying to do a low fuel performance run at the end of the session. You catch cars and you're sort of 4 seconds, 5 seconds quicker. They do not need to get out of the way because Stroll was still pushing as well.
Bearman indeed has found time now, puts himself ahead of Nico Hülkenberg on that set of soft tyres some laps into the stint. So is now, will now, if the session ends, and there's only a minute and 45 left to go, will end the session around 2.5 tenths actually, clear of Nico Hülkenberg, which is a fine effort.
Hülkenberg's still out there on a set of softs. You got it. If you're the race driver, you cannot.
FP1 qualifying, rookie versus veteran. That's what we're seeing now. You can hear Lando Norris in his McLaren putting a couple of laps on a set of hard tyres to end the session.
Nico Hulkenberg is not short of confidence. If he's beaten by Ollie Behrman, it's not going to eat him up inside, I don't think, tonight. But surely you want to get something on the board and at least put the rookie in his place at the end of the session. He was on a better lap. Hulkenberg caught Lance Stroll in the slow speed, didn't improve, ran off the road, remains 18th place. I think Behrman has probably been the most impressive of the rookies out there today. Difficult to tell though, when I think the other ones just can't have had a fair crack at it, running probably more routine test programs with big gaps to their teammates. But Behrman pressing on well, and with that level of car control, maybe got away with it, but he's found a bit more pace on the second lap. Decent effort. I
think Behrman's probably had the most beneficial programme as well, or certainly the most straightforward programme, without as many reliability issues as some others. And certainly sort of Hadjar, Doohan, Pourchaire. Vesti appears to have been pounding around relatively healthily and hasn't found too much pace in comparison to Hamilton. So he's out there, has done a lap on a set of softs and is decently off the pace. Hadjar caught out, I think, by what is a pretty spectacular performance by Daniel Ricciardo for this stage in the weekend on the set of softs, and we'll see if he's able. I mean, he's going to give Red Bull something to think about if he now manages to put that out. I mean, you don't think it's enough laps, really, to challenge Sergio Perez for the end of the season, for that Red Bull seat at the end of the season. If Ricciardo runs a set of top 6 finishes through these final 4 Grand Prix, he could really give them something to think about at the end of the year, couldn't he?
Never say never. And Nico Hulkenberg has never said never either. Final lap, and he's got up to 12th position ahead of Ollie Behrman, and by a clean second in the end for Hulkenberg. So showing a bit more pace in the Haas. And the checker flag has come out. I don't think, you know what? One driver might improve, and it's Ollie Behrman in the Haas. 17th, I don't think he's going to get up towards Hulkenberg's pace. But the order then at the end of FP1 is Verstappen top, less than a tenth clear of Alex Albon in the Williams. Then it's Sergio Perez, home hero, who gets a little bit of a cheer as he comes through for the final time through the baseball stadium and completes a final lap of the session. Decent session from Sergio Perez, within 3/10 of Verstappen. Then it's Norris, Leclerc, Piastri, Sainz, Ricciardo, Ocon and Stroll, your top 10. Lewis Hamilton just over a second away and just outside the top 10. 11th place for Lewis Hamilton, 12th for Hulkenberg, 13th for Zhou, 14th Sargent, 15th in the end for Behrman. Good improvement, only 3/10 away from Nico Hulkenberg there, improving right at the death as the flag fell. Then it's Alonso, Hadjar, Doohan, Vesti, and no time at all for Théo Pourchaire. A tough day as a reserve driver for Pourchaire.
Really tough for Pourchaire, no doubt. He does get a fair few runs here and there in cars. There's a set of regulations around historical cars where they can run cars that are more than 2 years old. So he will get other opportunities, no doubt, in a Formula 1 car to show his ability. But showing his ability most in that session for me, Alex Albon again, who appears to have forgotten he's in a Williams at this stage of the weekend and popped the car up in the top 3. In a team who don't know if they're going to be fast or not, but seem to turn up somewhere near the hunt, at least from mid-season onwards, don't they?
Yeah, best day of my life, mate. That was incredible.
Yeah, good job, man. Good job. Hamilton
Thank
behind you.
And for the man that jumped into Yuki Tsunoda's car, delivered a quite angry first radio message when something wasn't quite perfect. What a turnaround there to hear that. Best day of his life. That was Isaac Hadjar, who's finished this one in 17th place. Théo Pourchaire already out of the car with a shrug of the shoulders, watching everyone else do the practice starts now. But I guess you've got to be appreciative. Getting a go in a Formula 1 car is an absolute privilege at the best of times.
The disappointment written all over Théo Pourchaire's face there as he stands on the pit wall. Isaac Hadjar, a driver who really wears his heart on his sleeve, and we've seen both ends of it this weekend so far. They're under massive pressure in that Red Bull programme. We know how pressurising of a programme it is, and it's so full as well this year, with several drivers being let go out of it as a result of their performances, and of course always new talent welling up from the junior formulae below. Now, as drivers take the opportunity to make their practice starts, What stood out for you in that one, JP? I think it's a Red Bull dominated. Max Verstappen P1, Alexander Albon P2, Sergio Perez P3. But from the rest of the order, what stood out for you?
I think Red Bull, they look really strong from the word go. I'm amazed how close Albon is. There's quite the gap between the two Williams cars. Sargent more than a second away, so it is an Albon special there, splitting the Red Bulls, but Perez still has a couple of tenths back to your McLarens, your Ferraris. I'd say it's an ominous start for them, and kind of as you'd expect, a little bit behind. What do you reckon?
Yeah, it's going to be a busy grid through the middle of the order, and off outside the point you've got Nico Hulkenberg 12th, Guan Yu Zhou in 13th, Logan Sargent 14th, Ollie Bearman 15th, Fernando Alonso finishes in 16th, Avik Hadjar 17th, Jack Doohan 18th, Vesti 19th, and Pourchaire without a time on the board. But messy stuff, isn't it, as they try to get their programs together. Usual suspects up front, with Alex Albon being a little bit of an interloper, and Daniel Ricciardo as well joining us in the top 10, perhaps uninvited.
Yeah, a decent job from Daniel Ricciardo, 8th place, and he will build on that, as will everyone. And that is the lowest grip first session done. Verstappen is top, and we will be back for FP2 in a couple of hours' time. Verstappen top in FP1.